Hey you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we are finally making the cage cover for a Ferret Nation cage. This is actually going to be for a triple Ferret Nation. However, I'm going to leave the measurements that you will need for the single and the double Ferret Nation, and I will also put the measurements for the Critter Nation. I just want to say that those cages are basically the same size. The only difference is with a Critter Nation, the sides measure 24 inches, and on a Ferret Nation, they measure 25 inches. However, when I make like my cage liners and things like that, I use a template and it works on both cages. So it's not a substantial difference, but I will put that information in the description as well. If you wanted something that was really form-fitting, that inch may make a little bit of a difference. I wouldn't really think it would make too much of a difference, but it could make your cover a little bit looser than maybe you would want it to be. So the other thing is this fleece, this cover that I'm making in this tutorial is going to be made from fleece. Now this is upon request of the person who purchased it. I've actually gotten several requests for cage covers made in fleece. I personally would probably use a cotton just because it's more airy and it would not hold in as much heat. However, that depends on where you live. If you live in a place that's cool or that it gets cold in the winter, maybe having a fleece liner or a fleece cage cover would be more appropriate than having a cotton cover. I know my ferret room gets kind of chilly, so if your goal is to, give them peace and quiet and then also to try to keep them a little bit warm, fleece would be perfect. So it's kind of up to you, and it's kind of what you need for your environment in your house. So this is going to be made with blizzard fleece, and which is, I personally think, a little bit easier to sew than anti-pill. Anti-pill is more fluffy, but all in all, it can be done basically in any fabric that you would want. I don't know that I do like leather or anything, but I'm gonna try to make this video as quick as I can, where I can include all of the parts that are important and that you can follow along. It is probably going to end up being a longer video because it is a little bit more involved than some of the other projects that we have made. So without further ado, let's do it. Okay, you guys, so for this tutorial, you're going to need your sewing machine for sure. You're going to want to get a ruler, maybe even a yardstick, because it's a lot of fabric and measuring it out is always fun. You're going to want a pair of scissors for sure, or a rotary cutter, and a pair of scissors, some pins, or some clips. So these are 100 clips. They come in these cute little containers from Amazon. They're about $7.99 a container. They last a really long time. If I didn't make 40 sets of cage liners a week, I would have them last longer. But okay, so that's what you're going to need. And then the measurements for your fabric is all going to be in the description of the video. But in general, you're going to need a top piece. You're going to need 2 side pieces. You're going to need a back piece. And for your front, you can do this a couple of ways. For me, I have 2 fronts because my cage is going to open like curtains. But you can make it one piece. You can make it half the height of the cage so that just the top portion's covered. You could make it with 2 panels like curtains, or you could make it with just a lip that's about 8 inches that holds it in place. And I will put a picture on the screen now of a cage that's made like that, cover that's made like that, so you can see it. And once you have cut those pieces out, I'm gonna start with the front panels. So that's what we're gonna start with. All right, so before we get started, I want to talk really quickly about the amount of fabric that you're gonna need. If you're using cotton fabric opens up to be about 48 inches. So when you unroll it or you get it home, it'll be folded in half, and when you open it up, it will open up, and this is about 48 inches wide, okay? Now for me, the cage that I'm making a cover for is 76 inches long, which means that I can't open it up and use that. So I'm gonna have to buy enough fabric. I'm gonna buy yards of fabric. For me, each panel took 2 yards, 2 and about a quarter, we'll say, roughly, a little less, but 2 1/4 yards. So to make this my entire cage cover out of fleece, I ended up using about 9 yards of fabric, give or take a little bit. With cotton, you're going to have the same thing happen because you can't open it up as long as you need it, which means you have to unroll it, measure it, and then cut the width down. So if I open this and I measure it 72 inches, I then have to open it up, or however you cut your fabric, and measure 36 across, 25 across, and cut it that way. You will have fabric left over, but it does take a lot of fabric, which can be expensive. Fleece measures 50, like I think it said, fleece measures 59 inches across. And so just know going into this that if you're making it for a triple or a double or even a single, it's going to take a decent amount of fabric. You will have some fabric left over, but it will not be very wide. Maybe it will, depending on, it will be on your side pieces, but it won't be for your front and back pieces. You won't have a ton of fabric left over. You would have some left over. But to get the length you need, it's going to take, if you're making a triple, about 8 yards. And I'll do the math to tell you about how much it would take if you were doing it for a double and a single. But it can get a little expensive. So if you're buying fabric for this and you go to Joann's or you go to Michael's, wherever you get your fabric, try to get a coupon. Trust me, it can be expensive. Okay, so when the cage cover is finished for a triple, it's going to measure 36 by 25 by 76. The measurements that I'm using here are going to include a seam allowance, and some of the pieces have to be, hems have to be included. So like on my front piece, you don't want a raw edge showing on the curtain when you open it. You want it to be pretty and finished. So my front panel, if you're not making a curtain style and you're just making it all one piece, it should measure 37 inches wide. But because I have two panels, I had to cut that in half. Now with fleece, it's hard to tell the right side from the wrong side, but this does have a darker side. That's going to be your right side. So I'm going to flip it so that the wrong side is facing me. And what we need to do is we need to put a hem on the bottom and a hem on the side that it's going to open. So one side of this piece is going to be attached to the side of the cage, and you're never going to see the edge. But the other edge is going to be visible because it's curtain style and you're going to be able to see it. So I don't want the raw edge showing. So we're going to pick the part that's the bottom, and we'll just do this end that's with me because it doesn't matter. So I have the wrong side facing me, or what I'm calling the wrong side. We're going to fold it about 1 inch up, and I'm just going to pin. I'm going to pin it, or clip it 1 inch. So now what I've done is I've folded this like this. So you should have a finished edge like this. Now this is my bottom. Now what you need to do is you also need to fold in one of the sides. This is going to be the side that is not connected to any other part of the cage. This is strictly going to be visible where you pull it open like a curtain. So you want to again fold that in. I'm going to say a 1/2 inch. And you can just overlap this, and I'll try to, let me bring the camera in so you guys can see what I'm doing. So what I want to do is I want to take this piece right here and fold it about a 1/2 inch. And clip it in place. So it should look like this. And then you're going to continue to fold a 1/2 inch all the way down the side. Just keep folding. Okay, so now that you have put this 1/2 inch on one side and on the bottom, you're going to want to take that over to your sewing machine, and you want to stitch along the edge to hold that hem in place. You can use, I would recommend a zigzag stitch, especially if you're using cotton. With fleece, you could do a straight stitch, but if you're using cotton to stop it from fraying or any of that, you're going to want to use a zigzag stitch or a serger. If you're using fleece, you could get away with a straight stitch. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch just because it looks nicer. And then when we come back, we're going to do the other panel the same way, except we're going to do them opposite, and I'll show you when we're done. Okay, so now that you've stitched down the side of one of your sides, and the bottom should be stitched all the way across the bottom. This is the one you've already stitched a seam on the edge. Okay, this is the good side. The bottom is hemmed, and you have it laying like this. So let's pretend this is on your cage. Now for this seam, this is the wrong side is facing me, but once it's all sewn and it looks like this, your finished edge is going to be lined up against this finished edge so that you open it like a curtain. So it's important when you do this and you do your bottom that you make sure that you're putting your seam, your hem on the correct side of your front panel. If you accidentally put the hem over here, then it's not going to make any sense when you open it. So test it out before you stitch it, and just make sure that when it's done, when you're done stitching, that both your finished edges are going to be bumping up against each other and that your raw edges are going to be opposite, because these are going to connect to the side panels, so they don't need any kind of stitching, fancy stitching or finished edges. And you want to make sure that your bottom hem is where this bottom hem is. And so at the end, they should look like this, and the finished edges should be facing, butted up against each other, just like a curtain. Now we're going to go to our sewing machine and do the exact same thing. You're going to stitch up down that finished edge to hold it in place, and along the bottom to hold it in place. Okay, so now that you've stitched the hem on this one, you should have two pieces that match each other, that can open, where the hems are facing each other and the bottoms are both finished. Alright, now you can set these pieces aside for now, just for a second. And you want to grab the rest of your pieces, and what you're going to want to do is create that 1 inch hem, and you're going to stitch just along the bottom. And you're going to do that to the two side pieces as well. Okay, so now that you have sewn the hem on all of your 4 panels at the bottom, or in this case 5 panels because I have 2 front panels, and once you have sewn the hem on the sides on one side of each of the front panels so that they create a curtain, we're ready to assemble it. You want to get your top piece, you want to open it up, you want to make sure that the right side is facing you. So we are going to be assembling our front panels first, and you have to do it in this order. It's very, very important. If you don't do it in this order, your cage cover will not turn out correctly. You're going to get one of your panels, or if you have just one panel, you're going to put them right sides facing together, and you're going to make sure that your hem is, you're going to connect it at the raw edges. So not where your hem is on this raw edge. You want it right sides together. Now remember that so I'm putting it like this, but once we stitch this, it's going to open up like this. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're attaching this. So you want to make sure that when you have these pieces attached, your two edges, your two finished edges, your hems on your front piece are butting up against each other. And I will do a close-up once we get this on here. Alright, so you laid your top piece down, and what we're going to do is we're going to clip it or pin it, whichever you want. So pin that in place. And you're going to want to, you don't got to pin down the side, but pin about 1/2 inch around the corner, around this corner edge right here. Now grab your second piece. If you just have one piece, you would just put that one piece across. And I'm even going to let them overlap some at the top up here. I'm going to bring the camera down and show you guys. Okay, so what we've done is we've laid our front pieces on top of our top with the right sides facing down. We've clipped the raw edges at the top, and our two finished edges right here are now butting up against each other. Once you sew this, this will flip over like it'll be like curtains, but we don't want to do that yet. You want your top pieces right here to just overlap just a little bit. You want to make sure that your top is just a hair. That way, once this is done, it closes the way that you want it to. Okay, so what you're going to do next is you're going to sew from one end to the other. and then back stitch at each end. So straight across. And I would go over where the overlap is, I would go back over that at least twice. Okay, so now that you have stitched this in place, the top front panels, go ahead and flip them so they're out of the way. Now you're going to get one of your side panels and you're going to put it right side facing the top piece. So, and you're going to match up the raw edge to the side. So pin that down in place. And you're going to do this for both side pieces. And you're going to stitch along this edge. And then you're going to back stitch at each end. Okay, so now you've attached your side piece, one of your side pieces, and both your front pieces. Now attach your second side piece the exact same way that you just attached the other side piece. Now it's time to attach the back piece. And again, you're going to take the back piece, you're going to put the right sides of the fabric facing together. It's kind of bulky and it's big, so you need a kind of a decent sized space. Once you pin this, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to stitch across the back of it. So now you have your front panels, your two side panels, and your back panel. Here's the tricky part. It's not really tricky. You need to take each corner and match it up to the corner that it coincides with. And you need to make sure you stitch this correctly. You want to be stitching so that you're stitching the back of the fabric. So you're going to flip your top back over so that the wrong side is facing you. You're going to match your top piece up with the side piece that's next to it. You're going to line up the edges. And we're going to do this for each side until all the sides are closed. So basically you're matching the raw edge of the front of your panel to the raw edge of the side that's next to it. You're going to match up all of these sides like this, and you're going to stitch all the way down to the very, very bottom. And you're going to back stitch at the top and bottom. Okay, so what I've done so far is I've stitched two of the sides. So I've stitched this side, but not that side. This is the back you're looking at. And so the side piece and the back piece are now connected as one piece. Also, the front piece and the side piece are connected. So now what you're going to do is you're going to do the same thing to the other side. And you're matching the two side pieces together, clipping them and sewing all the way down the side. Make sure you're sewing right sides together. Okay, so now that you've connected your sides, your whole thing should be one piece now. You should have your top and all your sides. There should be no openings on any of the sides. It's really hard to show you this because there's no way for me to really lay it out beside how I have it. But basically, this is it. And it is all one piece. So what I'm going to do now, because we have made the front as like curtains, but there may be times where you want these to be open, and so I'm going to add ties to these. But I want to kind of go and put this on to make sure that it fits, and then also pin where I want my ties to be so that I know that they're even and that I know where the placement is. So what I would recommend is that you put this on your cage, you find out where you want your ties to be, and then you pin where you want them so that when you come back and bring it back to your sewing area, you know exactly where you need to be adding your ties. And then I'll show you how to make the ties as well. This is what the tie will look like complete. You're going to want to go to your cage and on each front panel mark where you want to place the tie using a straight pin. And then I recommend testing it out by pulling them back and using a straight pin to mark where you want your elastic to be in the front seam on each side. You want to make sure that your ties are evenly placed across from each other. Next, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a tie. It looks like this. I found this adorable button at Joann Fabric that matched perfectly. So what I've done is I've created a tie, and I'm going to be using some elastic cord. So basically what will happen is when you tie the front panel back, the two front panels, it will hook around a piece of elastic like this. And I will show you guys exactly how to do that. So how I did that was I cut a 13 by 4 inch strip with the right sides of the fabric facing together. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch all the way around, and I'm going to leave a 2-inch opening, and then I'll flip it inside out and top stitch the top. Okay, so now I've stitched this. I'm going to clip the corners, and then you're just going to take that opening and you're going to turn it so that this is facing right side out. You want to pop out your corners. Okay, so now it's facing right side out. Make sure that you've popped all the little corners out so that they're not tucked inside. All right, and then what you're going to want to do is you have this opening here. So see how you have your seams kind of fold in automatically. You want to line them up so that it looks like the rest of the edges, and then pin it. So basically, I just clip it because it helps the seams, the edges to stay pretty and stay in place. You don't have to do this, but when you top stitch it, it'll help hold everything the way that you want it to be. Now we're going to top stitch all the way around. Okay, so now that you've stitched this and you've top stitched it, you got to add your button. You're going to need a needle and thread. We're going to stitch our button on. What I did was I pinned where I wanted my elastic. I opened up the seams on the edge and I put in a piece of elastic. And basically it looks like this on the underside. And I'm going to trim that off. And then it looks like this on the outside. I'm going to attach this to the curtain part so that it can be tied back and then held in place with the button. If you notice on this side I have pins exactly where the seam is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a thread ripper, and I've already measured out my elastic for the size of my button. So what I'll do is I'm going to open up the seam just enough to slide the elastic through, and I want to make sure I keep my spot. So I'm just going to take my seam ripper, and it's just this little tool right here, and then you just open up your seam and you're going to stick your elastic in the size that you need it for your button. If that's what you're using, you don't have to use a button. You don't have to make tie backs. It's completely up to you how you choose to do it. And I'm going to try to show you guys the hole, but I don't know if I'll be able to do that. Let's see. There's a tiny hole I put in the fabric. So there's a tiny little hole right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of elastic. I'm going to fold it in half. And then I want to make sure that it goes around my button. You want it to be tight enough, but not so tight that it breaks as soon as you put it on. So this is about good. I'm going to put the button loop through to about where my fingertips are and stitch it in place. And I'm going to look at it from the other side to make sure it's right. So it should look like this. And then again, I'm going to pinch it into place and just make sure that I have it right. You don't, once you sew this in, so that's perfect. I'm going to hold that right where it is. I'm going to get a clip, or I would recommend a clip, or just to hold it with your hands. I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to re-stitch the seam where I opened it up, and then I'm going to zigzag stitch that elastic. Unfortunately, I lost the footage for the next part, but I'm going to try to explain it the best that I can. To attach the tie, you're going to want to take the end without the button and face it inside of the cover and stitch it in the spot you marked with a pin. You're going to do this for each front panel. You're going to also want to make sure the front of the button is facing the inside of the cover. Okay, so once you have done all of that, your cage cover should look like the one in this photo. But please keep in mind that this cover was for a triple. That is why it is so long at the bottom. When it is on the triple cage, it will not be that long. So just take that into consideration when you're looking at the picture. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you get confused or get lost, just send me a message or an email. My email is on the About page of my YouTube channel, and you can also email me through my website as well. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful week.